Well, hi, everyone. I'm Mike Hingson, and you are listening to Unstoppable Mindset. Today we have a guest who I find extremely fascinating for lots of reasons, and I'm going to tell a story on him a little bit here. When we first chatted, it was because we had met on LinkedIn, and he wasn't sure he had a story to tell or was in a position to really tell stories. And I kind of disagreed with that a little bit because my belief is that everyone has a story to tell. But you know what? As we progressed and as I asked him to prepare for the podcast, turns out there are lots of stories. So, Charlie Cohen, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. It's quite an honor.
Well, I think the honor is all mine. And one of the things that I learned about Charlie, and we'll get to it, is that Charlie now lives in Israel. He used to live in the U.S. and in Massachusetts, and I'm anxious to hear all about that story. But let's start kind of at the beginning, maybe while you were over here and going through school, and anything you want to tell us about growing up, and we can proceed from there.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts. Parents got divorced when I was very young, 4. So I was like your typical, 70s latchkey kid. Um, yeah, I grew up in Sharon, which was a Jewish neighborhood. I lived in an area that wasn't so Jewish. And, I was kind of an awkward kid, I think. I would describe myself. Very not good at sports as a little kid growing up. My father brought me to this thing called Al Lipsky Sports Club for kids that were athletically challenged. And I quickly caught up. And, by 9 years old, I was decent in basketball. And, in my school, that was like, it was saving me from being bullied and picked on. I found myself getting in a lot of fights and picked on that I was an awkward, easy target, I think, as a kid growing up. I was actually, my mom got married to a wonderful man when I was 10, and he allowed my mother to convince me to play football. And football for me as a kid growing up did wonderful, wonderful things for me because I had absolutely no confidence. I just really did not feel good about who I was, strong, was picked on as a kid. It bothered me tremendously and bullied. And I think football gave me a certain self-esteem and also allowed me to pick on bullies back. So I was in practice and I'd get some of those kids that would be picking on me and I get to hit them. And I was like, there was a movie called The Water Boy. And so I think I kind of imagined myself back like that, like just letting all that rage go. And it was a good outlet for me. Yeah, I grew up pretty standard. I strive to be popular like everyone else. Watched all the movies. I was prom king, which was quite a surprise to my dorky 10-year-old kid to going to the gym, lifting weights, being a footballer, and getting to be prom king. And going to college at Purdue University, which was a big school, and I was in a fraternity there, social chairman. Doing everything I could to have a good time, have fun. I was pretty much probably a C+ student. I had a motto, which was you can always retake a party. You can always retake a class, but never retake a party. And that was kind of like my life and growing up, trying to be an average, you know, fun, whatever. I don't think it's too, nothing too spectacular. Um, One thing I did do decently during that age is I coached sports as kind of a hobby. So at 18 years old, I coached one of my first teams. I was also a camp counselor when I was younger too. And my father was a coach, my stepfather, excuse me, was a coach. The family around him were coaches. And I just really, really loved it. And so I started doing it at 18 and had a lot of fun with it and just kind of continued.
I'm curious. You said, if I understood you right, that you started doing basketball at like 9, and you in part did it to stop being bullied. Um,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that? Why did that happen?
Why was I bullied? You look back, first of all, bullying is, to me, it's one of the saddest things. If there's one thing, if I could ever change in this world, it is stop bullying all types, all people. It's tremendously horrible. And, kids are weak, kids come off as weak or socially awkward or they're easy targets. So I think I was just an easy target and just that plain. And, this gave you kind of like a way of being quote unquote socially acceptable.
Got it.
Um, and I think that's what it was. I should mention, I was thrown out of Hebrew school too. I went to Hebrew school like an average kid, and I had some hard times in school. And, I worked very hard, just not to fall behind in school. And the Hebrew school on top of it, I was just the worst student there. And the self-esteem problems and everything else, I was just a problem kid in the class. And they asked me to leave or I quit, depending on who you ask. But I was actually thrown out of Hebrew school. So I was actually a reject
Mm.
from Temple Israel. Something I'm very proud of today because you never know when you're thrown out of school.
Yeah, well, you never know how things change and how you evolve over time. Well, you went to
That's
Purdue,
true.
so
Yep.
you spent time in Indiana.
Yep.
Um, so from cold Massachusetts to cold Indiana.
Yeah. And that's where I lost the Boston accent. So like people knew me as Charlie from Boston. And
Charlie, yeah.
I spent the summer out there, an extra summer at Purdue, and I came home and I heard, "Hey Charlie, how you been, Charlie? How about a beer?" And I heard the accent. As soon as I heard it, it was gone.
Yeah.
The Boston accent.
Yeah. So you don't do Pakyakana Havayat anymore.
No, I haven't done it since my 20s. I stopped doing it. It just once you hear it, it's over. Once you hear the accent, oh, do I sound like that? No, it's over.
Yeah, well, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with having those kinds of
That's
accents
true.
either. There's
That's
nothing wrong
true.
with being proud of where you come from.
That's true. It should be inclusive to all accents, even Boston accents.
Well, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. My memories of living in Winthrop for 3 years and being associated with Massachusetts for some other times around that are very fond. I loved being there. I loved the accent. And I always found sports fans in Massachusetts
Crazy.
incredible.
Nuts.
Oh yeah, if the Sox lost the opening game of the season, you immediately heard "wait till next year."
That's what it
I,
was. I told my
I
kids I was a big fan before 2004. Now I don't care so much, but before
yeah,
that, I loved them.
yeah, it's a different world today, and I was just going to say, I wonder if people say that now since they've had a couple of successes in the 2000s, but nevertheless, they're very avid fans back there, and that's okay. It's
It is
fun.
okay. It is fun. It's a good, healthy outlet. Yep.
So you went to college and Purdue and all that, and then what did you do with your life?
Yeah, so I was a sales guy. I started off in sales in 93. I went back to Massachusetts after graduation. I took a job selling copiers for 50 bows. And, the idea was to be a good, pay your dues and get a pharmaceutical sales job and, get yourself a car and a nice expense account. And yeah, I traveled with a few different companies and found out it wasn't for me and went to startups, which was surprised everyone because it was like 1994 when I did that.
Yeah,
I love the creativity. I love the freedom. I love the honesty of it. So I just felt from a salesperson, I just enjoyed it much better than the corporate gig.
yeah. What kind of startups did you participate in, or did you start up?
Yeah, so I was in a whole bunch of, as a kid, I got into the internet. These guys introduced me to, I met some guys that were very into computers. I don't want to stereotype, but they needed a salesperson, and I needed someone who knew stuff about computers. And we made a really cool team, a bunch of young guys, and they introduced me to email and internet and all this incredible stuff in like 93 or 94. And you bounced around for, trying to start up a company where you're working for companies on the side. And I met two brothers and a father. Um, and we kind of hit it off, and I was working for one company, working for another, and we developed a lot of business together, and they ended up hiring me as like their first sales guy and in their side of the house in Acton, Massachusetts in 1994. And we ended up building probably one of the first cloud SaaS companies in the world, which was really cool. It was a really
That
great
was the
experience.
EscapeNet,
Softscape.
Softscape
Yeah.
rather, not EscapeNet,
Yeah.
Softscape.
No, it's all right. Yeah.
And
So
what and what did it do?
so basically what happened was is they were software guys. They made real software that was working, and sold in boxes. And one company in the area asked them to build a database version of Outlook. The old ones in the
Uh,
old days were flat file, they were slow, and these guys
yeah,
wanted a nice big fast version of it. So they built this task pad calendar on a database, and we tried to capitalize and sell it. And no one really understood what it was and how to use it. And I figured out that you could use it for performance reviews. So you have a huge company, you say you have 26,000 worldwide employees, and why don't you use it instead of paying Iron Mountain $10 and $15 for paper? Why don't you use us for $5? You have a database and you can query it and do all the sorts of cool stuff. And people are like, wow, that's really neat. And no one at the time knew how to host a web server. They didn't know how to deal with routers or firewalls or any of that stuff. So we would say, hey, do you want us to host it for you until you're ready? And they say, sure. So they would pay us a few extra $1,000 to host it. And that's where we got that's it. That's how we had it. That's a cloud. That's our cloud SaaS company.
Wow.
So it was really cool. It was really, really cool.
So how long did you do that?
So we were there. I was there for a few years, and I kind of from there at the same time, or a little bit before that, I had a hobby, and which I was a coach. I told you I coached football or coached youth sports, and so we did that for 3 years. And what interfered with that was this kind of like this story with the football thing, you know. The coach,
Yeah, you got to keep your priorities straight.
yeah. So like I
My
was going about my life, and I had an experience that really,
yeah,
changed my life.
my brother-in-law is a contractor and builds homes, remodels homes, and so on. But as I said, you got to keep your priorities straight. In the winter, he lives in Sun Valley, Idaho. But for many years in the winter, he would go over to France and was a licensed mountain ski guide in
Awesome.
Europe. And so he took people and did off-piste skiing. So as I said, you got to keep your priorities straight in the winter, at least for Gary.
Yeah,
He
definitely.
doesn't do that anymore, but now he's talking about retiring. So there you go.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah,
you coached football,
yeah.
and obviously that kept you busy, and that that and a job probably kept you out of trouble.
That was the idea. I told you my mom married a wonderful person, and he was always involved in sports and giving back, and it was something he just did, and I always appreciated that, and I love coaching, and it was a lot of fun. I got a call, like I think in 1995 from the Sharon, head of the Pop Warner team, asking me to coach, saying that there's a team that never won a game. They give up 40, 50 points a game. They never scored, and the best player was a girl. And they said if I was a last resort, if I didn't take this team, they weren't going to play this year. And I just thought it was
Hmm.
so cool. So I said, I'll do it. I was just the best thing I ever did.
What happened?
Well, the first thing I did is I had a coach named Jim Cummings, and it's actually his son JJ. It was is a big I think a commander in the Navy, and he was actually featured. He was actually one of the people that did the Top Gun. I guess Top Gun #2 came out, and he was
Right.
one of the people, being a consultant in terms of flying and trying to make the experience in movies real as possible. But he's the father. Uh, Mr. Cummings, and he was my coach in Pop Warner in high school. He was the line coach and the defensive coach. And the first thing I did is I went to him and I said, Coach Cummings, yeah, I know you're retired, but I got a problem. I got a huge project, and I need your help. You can coach offense. I'll coach line and defense, and you have fun because he was never allowed to coach offense. So he thought it was funny, and I said, I'll deal with the parents. I'll deal with all the stuff. And he said, okay, I'll do it with you. And so we worked together. And I worked with another person, Steve Rabb, who was a senior when I was a freshman. He's a great guy. He coached with us, and we put together a hell of a coaching staff. And we really, really coached our brains out. We really worked hard for these kids. And it was incredible. So we basically tried our hardest to turn this team around. We were losing games like 14-6 and 21-7. We had a game against this town called Hopkinton, in which it was like two 0-6 teams. And these kids have never won a game, the kids that I coach. And they even called it the toilet bowl. And
Oh,
yeah, it's really not good, especially when you lose the game 14-6.
yeah.
So we lost that game. And I was beside myself. At the end of the game, I had them all come out, in a circle around me. And I looked at their pants, nice yellow, bright yellow. I had them stick out their fingernails, and I checked their fingers, and they're all clean. I touched their foreheads, they're all clean. And the parents all around us. And I said, there's one good thing about this game is that your parents don't have to wash your uniforms for next game. That's what I said. And I also said that you lost this game not because that you stink or you're the worst team in the world, but because you have the combined heart of a field mouse. And that just came out of my mouth. But I thought that just I couldn't believe I said that. You have the combined heart of a field mouse, and we're playing this team called North Attleboro, and that name sounds scary, North Attleboro, and they were that good. This is like the perennial champions in Massachusetts at that time, and these teams are undefeated. They go to Orlando, and we're playing them the week coming up. And I say to these guys, if you play like this next week, they're going to kill you, and you'll be lucky to go home with your parents. And I made them all promise me that they're going to play 110%. And I don't care what the jersey is. Is it the Patriots jersey? Is it a Jets jersey? Is it a Giants jersey? I don't care who it is. You're going to play your guts out. And they all promised me that. We showed up that game against North Attleboro.
And the girl was still playing, I assume.
Yeah. The girl's fantastic. Fantastic.
Okay.
I didn't pick on her during that game. She was a fantastic player in person. And we won 13-12. We won 13-12. She scored 2 touchdowns. It was funny, they missed a field goal by an inch. One kid caught it. Ben Bradley, who turned out being a veteran in Iraq, caught a ball 4th and 1. At the time, he's like, I think 10 years old. Caught the ball 4th and 1 on his hip. 2 North Attleboro defenders ran into each other, and then Jesse ran for a touchdown. It was just like right out of a movie. And we won 13-12. It was one of the greatest, I'd say, before I became, it was one of the greatest days of my 20s. Definitely a great experience winning that game. Blew me away, blew me out of the water.
Wow. And it doesn't get any better than that, but that also proves the value of a coach by any standard, that it's all about the coach being able to really get the team to do the things that they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And there's not enough that you can possibly say about the value of really a good coach. And did kids tell you after that game that your comment about the amount of heart they have, did anyone say that made a difference?
No, I don't think, these are kids,
Yeah,
It's
I
funny,
do.
one of the coaches, the girl today is the head coach of York, Maine basketball team.
Mm.
And she's doing a great job. I think they got the semifinals, and I'm glad that she's doing well. She's a hell of a person back then, and her grandfather was a great legend in Sharon as a basketball coach. Someone I looked up to tremendously and copied as a coach. I had the honor to coach his grandchild. It was just an incredible honor for that. But what happened was like after that happened, all these movies came out, like the Mighty Ducks came out,
Yeah.
Little Giants came out, and people kept on coming up to me, laughing at me, saying, "You hear that movie? Ha ha ha! You're a Disney coach." And I'm like, "What?" They're like, "Girl win, da da da." It's like you're like the real Disney coach, and everyone thought it was funny, and I thought, and I guess it dawned on me, it was like the first time I think I ever really made the association, and hearing the call of God in my life, because I realized that winning that game is a miracle. Like all the things I mentioned about the kid catching it up 4th and 1 on his hip, the 2 players running into each other, and the fact that they played so great, perfect. I mean, we couldn't coach a better game of. I mean, you can count the errors, mistakes that we made as a team and as a coach in a Pop Warner game, an amateur. Like, I'm talking,
Yeah.
we coach professionally. And that's impossible. I'm not that smart. We're not that good. We're not that well practiced. And I realized it was an open miracle for me that the odds of us winning that game, I could play them 100 times or lose. And if we'd lost 21-14, it doesn't mean anything. I still would have been a great coach. And I really took it to heart, the message of why God would interfere with a Pop Warner game to make it win. And I think it's what you said, that if we lost 21 something, I think I would have told you I wasn't a great coach. It was a great team. This person did this. I wouldn't have accepted it. I think when I realized that the team won, I had to accept I was a great coach and I had a gift. And I realized that God had orchestrated all that for me to take home that lesson, and that I wasn't a worthless person. I wasn't someone just, shouldn't go drinking or having fun, and my life was a little bit more meaningful than that. And that I should take myself a little bit more seriously because I could do some good in this world. And I think that's where it really started for me.
The other side of it, or the other part of it, is You mentioned God interfering, and I kind of question God interfering in the game. Was
That's
it
funny,
was it
isn't it?
well, yeah, because was it that, or was it you were finally listening to God? And I keep going back to the comment that you made about the amount of heart that they had, and whether they recognized it at the time. Um, the 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 point is that you struck a nerve, um, and you listened to God, who
Yeah,
put those words, who gave you those words to use, and you had the choice to use them or not.
right, right.
And I think that God gives us the opportunity and the ability to choose. And that's one of the greatest gifts that he's ever given us, which is the ability to choose. It's up to us as to whether we want to listen or not. I wish more people would really stop and listen to what God tells them. Well, you clearly did
Yeah,
that day, and look what happened.
yeah. And it's interesting what you're saying because I think if I look at myself, I think if I didn't have that like pat in the shoulder, look, you won. You have to accept you're a good coach. You have value. I think without that knowledge that there's a value to me personally, I would never even think of trying to hit my potential as a God-fearing person. It just would
Yeah.
never have occurred to me. Why not go to the Kentucky Derby? Why not party? Why not have fun? What does it matter if I hit my potential or not? I'm a good guy. It doesn't really matter. And all the speeches that you gave to or I gave to the football team and everything that came out of my mouth kind of came back on me full circle. And I look at people, that I think that's the number one reason why people don't listen is because they think, why should I try? I can't make a difference. What does it matter anyway? And yeah, I hope if someone hears this, they hear that's the biggest lie out there. It's not true. That people, I believe this and I've learned this that evil exists only because there's a vacuum that we don't achieve our potential. And when people don't achieve their goodness that they could do, it leaves the room for evil people to be successful in our place. And I think that's something I took to heart. That if I have a potential for good to do good to be good, I'm going to do my best for God and the world and everybody.
And that is all you can do, right? As
That's right.
long as you know you're doing your best, you're trying as hard as you can. What more can you or God ask for?
I hope I'm doing it. I hope I'm making God proud. I hope I'm making my ancestors proud. I hope making everyone proud. But yeah,
Yeah,
right.
as long as you're doing your best and you know you're doing your best. And that's the thing. You can stop every day and think about, did I do as good as I could today? Could I learn something from everything that happened today? There's nothing wrong with
Right.
that. I wish more of us, and I wish all of us would take a little bit more time to think about that every day, because that thinking and that opening oneself up really does make a big difference in our lives if we allow that to happen.
A huge thing, huge thing. I'll tell you, I coach today in Israel, the tackle football team in my city, and there's a huge lesson I learned with one of these kids that I back in that team, and that I realized something incredible that people perform where their self-esteem is. So if I think I'm a loser, I behave like a loser. If I think I'm a
Mm-hmm.
champion, I'll get myself up there. And that I realized that if I'm not going to change someone's opinion of themselves, I'll never change their performance on the field. And it was an incredible thing to learn because I learned something about myself that if I thought of myself as nothing, that why should we try? You know, one of these kids, I'm doing a drill and I'm like, hey, I don't want to mention his name because he's a doctor today. And he might listen to this. I don't want to mention his name as a kid, even though he's one of my favorite players. But he looks at me. I say, why don't you pick it up? Let's call him JoJo, I'm making up his name. Why don't you try a little harder? He goes, why should I? We're going to lose anyway on Saturday. And the whole team looks at this kid, goes, wow, he's right. And I was beside myself, because we're working hard to turn the culture around, change their ideas around. And this kid just basically just declares mutiny. He says, why should we try? What's it matter? We're going to lose anyway. You know it. I know it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my season's over. So rather than lose my temper, I pulled him aside and I said, Jojo, I've had it. We're going to talk about this now. Jojo, either I'm right or you're right. But here's your take on it. You think you're doing a good job, and I'm nitpicking. I'm always on your case. What you do is never, ever good enough. Is that right? He goes, no. I go, don't lie to me. He goes, yeah. So he basically accused me of being a nitpicker. He's doing a decent job, and I'm just a real nothing. Nothing he does is good enough. So I said, is that how you feel? He says, yes. I said, well, we both agree on one thing, what you're doing. But here's where we disagree. You think you're doing okay because this is your potential. You're hitting your potential. I think you're much greater than that. And therefore, you're undershooting your potential. And the question is why do I believe in you more than you believe in you? And the kid was stunned, stunned. And then I put him, then I said, whatever you want now, but it's your choice. Do you want to be great or you want to be average? If you're great, I'm with you. If you want to be average, then go home and watch Bugs Bunny. But it's up to you now. And he says, I want to be a great coach. I said, okay, great. I put him back in the line, the drill. And of course, he went 110%, knocks on over. And I made a big deal about it. I jumped up and down, we cheered, and we made him a captain for the day. And it was a turning point in the individual. And I think that lesson being brought through the whole team took that last game that I mentioned, Hopkinton, to kind of get through to everybody. But it's a huge idea that why should I try? We're going to lose anyway. The world is going to be destroyed. People are too powerful. Evil is too big. And I think that's that attitude that I find myself having to fight constantly. Like, it does matter. You never know. If there is a God and he's listening, who knows? One person can make a difference. You
Did
never
you
know.
did you win the game?
No, that game we lost.
You
So that
lost.
that that story we lost, and
That's
then
okay.
the Hopkins. Yeah, then it took like 3, 4 weeks. The Hopkinton game, where I think the heart of the field mouse. I had probably given that same speech after I saw it worked to every kid except for the girl. The girl, the girl I didn't need to give that speech to, but I gave that speech to a lot of kids, and I think we finally got the message that week. And when we beat that team, it blew my mind, and even years later, it blew my mind, and it still does to this day. I just shake my head and say, did
But
I
you were
ever
talking about
experience that?
but you talked about JoJo and telling him to really live up to his potential.
Yeah, yeah,
What
yeah.
happened with him? You said he became a doctor.
Yeah, he's a doctor. I don't know how he is in sports, but he's a doctor.
Yeah. But did he ever acknowledge to you that your comment, your observation made a difference for him? Do you think that it did?
I don't know. Listen, when you coach, you don't really. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I call back all my coaches and say thank you to them. I hope I did, but I probably didn't. I did go back to Coach Cummings and I did ask him to coach with me, so that was a nice thing, I guess. But you know, you don't coach for that. I hope so. My mother tells me that people tell her, and my father tells me that people tell them that I made quite an impact at their incredible things. So
Well,
it may be because I went to Israel, but I hear through my parents that people are happy with me.
and ultimately you have to be happy with yourself,
Ah,
but you have to do that in a way and for a reason that really makes sense. And it isn't
right,
just inflating an ego. You can still look back on what you did, and listening to you
right.
and talk about it. It certainly sounds like you recognize that you said valuable things to people, uh, and invaluable things to people. And then it's up to them as to how they want to use it. But you've done your part.
Yeah, they're also little kids. They were little kids at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully they remember something. Or I had to play. I hope they had a great experience. I hope they look back on me with fondness and say I was a good guy, and I wasn't too hard on them. And if I was, I'm sorry. But yeah,
Well,
so that story really.
but if it made a
I'm sorry.
difference,
I
if
hope
it
so.
made
It
a
made a difference
difference, yeah,
made a difference in my life.
there you
Yeah.
go.
So I was going about this company thing, and I was going about my life and having everything the way I had wanted and dreamed about when this conscious attack hit me, when I realized that, I was really living out a dream that wasn't necessarily mine, and that I wanted to pursue something what I thought would be greater. And so you asked me how long, this is trying to answer that question, how long was I selling software for? So it was about, for about a few years. And about 1999, I had that change and I decided I was going to really pursue my dream, which I didn't even realize was my dream, which is to come to Israel to learn Talmud and to train to be a rabbi, but not a pulpit rabbi, not like a pulpit rabbi like that, but really become, more of the classical,
A teacher,
you know, yeah, but the classical sense,
right,
the old school, because like football, old school.
right. So in 1999, you,
Left my job, left my girlfriend at the time, left my life and declared myself a religious person, and it was a hard, very difficult thing to do because, my friends going to Purdue for homecoming, meeting people on Friday and Saturday nights, it meant that was over for me, you know, and that wasn't even going to Israel. That was just a life change itself. deciding to take on upon myself to learn something that's, the book itself, the Talmud is like 2,000 years old. It's written in Aramaic and Hebrew, and it's not easy for someone who's not good at school or good at foreign languages. So the idea that I want to go master that was kind of far out there. I want to master something like that was like, definitely far out.
But you did it,
I'm
and
still doing it. Yeah, I'm still in process. I've
it's
been
a
doing it for
process.
years. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it is a process, and there's nothing wrong with it being a process. Um, it's fun to hear the old joke about somebody practicing law or somebody practicing medicine, and why are you still practicing? Why aren't you good at it? And the answer is that if you're really any good at it, you're always learning.
That's true.
It
100%.
isn't a static thing, and it shouldn't be a static thing. And I think life is the same way. I think we should all be practicing living, and that's because it's an ongoing process,
That's awesome. You're 100% right.
which is really cool. So when did you move to Israel? In what, 2000, 2001?
Yeah. So I broke up with my girlfriend. I went to Israel for a month. I went I went back, and then I went back to Softscape, which was the company, and I paid off my credit card debts. I got some really big sales. I got a huge sale from the state of Connecticut that paid for me to pay off my debts in my car and come to Israel to go to school. And I went to what you call Yeshiva for 2 years, got married, and then went to another yeshiva, an Israeli one, like a real Israeli yeshiva. People speak Hebrew, little, 20-year-old kids, 22-year-old kids. I'm a 32-year-old man, walk around with these Israeli kids. And, I don't even speak Hebrew. They think I'm nuts, trying to, be in class with them. I look kind of funny. Imagine some 30-year-old guy showing up in high school saying, boy, I want to be a freshman. Teach me
Yeah,
physics.
yeah, but you did it.
Yeah, I did, it's crazy. I didn't do it. I did it. Yeah. Still
So,
doing it.
so well, you're still doing it. And so, what did you do from a job standpoint then? You moved to Israel, you went to school.
Yeah. So what I did is I worked at night, my um my stepfather's father, who was like a grandfather to me, a wonderful man, he put himself through law school. He supported himself. So I knew plenty of people who worked at jobs and supported themselves through law school. So I said I'll do the same. And I worked at night in sales. So I continued my sales profession. I still have a sales profession. I still, feed my family. I still work. And that's my main, job where I make money is in sales, corporate sales, business to business, which I like
Right.
because if I sold insurance, I would never stop. Everyone's a prospect. So I like
Yeah.
business to business because you can shut it off.
Yeah. So, when did you start your own company to sell?
So I basically, 8 years ago, we had our sixth kid. Well, my wife did. And, we need more money. And at the time, I'd worked part-time for some Cisco resellers, nothing big. And I needed another story because I sold copiers in the 90s. I was great at it. I had this awesome startup story in the 90s. It's like 2017. I was like, well, what have you done? And so I went out to a company in Israel, in Renana, in a city out here, and basically took them from almost nothing to 120 million. And it was like a top 4 startup in Israel. So it was really cool. I had a team of guys. I got to coach again and a great bunch of guys. And we really built that company. It's awesome. And that was one thing I did. And after that, I did another company that's another that we basically saved after 2 years of no revenue and turned it around. And I started my own company, which basically works with a lot of Israeli startups, helping them sell to America, cheap, easy, and, successfully, and so that's what I'm doing today. I'm a pitchman by trade. That's like my specialty, pitches.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that. Giving good pitches and being able to do it effectively is really what it's about. And telling
Yeah,
stories and telling
totally.
stories.
And being a nudge too. My grandmother used to call me a nudge, nudnik.
You're a nudge.
Yeah, yeah. I turned it into that's why I turned it into a job.
Nothing wrong with nudging. I've been accused of that, and I have no problem with it.
Well, you're a master salesman too, so takes one to
Got to
know
do
one.
got to do what you got to do,
Yeah.
but it works out pretty well. So you're coaching football over there.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a real team of adults and I love it. And it's just so much fun. I just never thought in a billion years that it would come back to it. But this team, Israel, Robert Kraft is the owner of the Patriots. Um, Also, Mark Wilf of the Vikings also helps out. And there's an Israeli football league here, American Football League. And this team came to Beit Shemish and they heard that I was once a great coach. And they had me come out for the team to coach them again. And they made me the head coach. It's just been great.
There you are.
Yeah, and it's good for my kids too. My kids are Israeli, so they don't understand what it was. Like they don't understand what a coach is. They had no
Yeah.
idea. So it's fun for them. They get to see it, the excitement, the games, and the hubbub. And so it's good for my kids to kind of see what I was like as a coach, what it is.
What really makes a good coach?
Oh gosh, that's the greatest question I think I've heard in a long time. And I say it's great because I put so much thought into this. And I found out something. There's a thing called in Hebrew it's called a midah. A midah is a character trait, a character trait. And one of the schools of thought I belong to is one of these lifelong dedication to developing your positive character traits. And one of the most important character trait they talk about, or that my rabbi talked about. So the person, so imagine, a coaching tree. And so this coaching tree goes back, and he's one of the greatest Jewish coaches of all time. His whole thing was what we call ayin tova. Ayin tova means a good eye, seeing the good in things. And what I can tell you as a good coach, a winning coach, you have to have a good eye. And it doesn't mean I'm a nice guy. I could be the most selfish, mean person ever, right? Manipulative, la-di-da, corrupt. But if I have to have a good eye and see the talent. So you hear people say, I don't know what he saw in me, but he brought it out. So all good coaches, I think winning coaches have the ability to see the talent, see the good. And I obviously don't want to use that in a corrupt way. I don't want to use it
No.
but I think that the number one thing to win is an eye in tova, a good eye, and also for marriage too. And it doesn't mean necessarily a visual eye. It means a spiritual eye that you see the good.
Well, and you see where everyone fits into that mosaic, into that pattern.
Right. 100%. And I think that is the key to a winning coach. Because if you do that right, there's no politics. Everyone's united, everyone feels good, and you're able to kind of harness different talents and get them to work together because people aren't threatened and they know their place and they know that you recognize their place and you see where they belong and that they're important. Like one of the biggest lessons to me that I just can't drill into enough people's heads is if I actually hurt my Achilles. I actually popped my Achilles tendon in the second game of the year because I sprinted to get water for my team. There was a timeout, and I sprinted so fast, I popped my Achilles heel, and I ran and got water. And then I did it a second time, and I was limping. And I looked at the guys on the sideline, and I threw the water bottle at them. I whipped it when I came off, and I said, "What? Getting water for your team is not important." Because it's true, it is, like getting what, okay, I'm not, there's a defensive coordinator, there's an offensive, there's someone making the play. Okay, I'm the head coach and I'm not doing anything, but do I have to sit there and look important? Or should I run and get water? I'm going to get water. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it the best I can. And the water person is so important to me and my team. And I think everyone knows that at the end of the year that anyone that's on the team is important, has a place, whether you're cheering, whether you're getting water, whether you're a star, it doesn't matter. And I wish that, I could carry that away to my community, that if I felt that everyone felt that way, I think the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, it's everyone has a place. And it seems to me that the best value that a coach can bring to a team is helping everyone recognize not only their place and that every place is important, but that you help bring out their desire. I won't say ability because the ability is probably there, but their desire to do the best with that place.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope. 100%.
Yeah. And that you're able to then bring out the best in everyone by helping them to recognize that they're really probably better than they thought, which is what Unstoppable Mindset is all about. We love to get people to recognize that they can be more unstoppable than they thought. So I really appreciate the things you're saying because that's exactly what this podcast is all about.
That makes me happy because when I first met you, I didn't know what I have to offer. Maybe I should work on my self-esteem.
There you go. See? Well, coach, you did it. So it seems to me that, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but in one sense, a rabbi is like a coach, or a coach is very much like a rabbi in the sense that you're clearly a teacher.
There's, my wife, when I first came to Israel, I was a coach, and Israel, they were behind. No one knew what it was. And after about 20 years, everyone's a coach. Everyone's a life coach. Everyone's a psychologist, everybody. So my wife says to me, Chaim, everyone's a coach now. You missed it. And I said, listen, boss, not everyone's a winning coach. Winning coaches are still unique. So like a winning coach, a coach that knows how to win consistently.
Right. So can everyone be a winning coach?
I think everyone could be a winner.
Yeah.
I think everyone could be a winner. But you said it, maybe your skills aren't to be a coach. Maybe your skills are to be the best water person, or maybe your skills are to be the best, quarterback or running back or lineman or whatever. That's the thing that you don't have to be jealous of my job, and I don't have to be jealous of your job. It's like we all have our jobs, and we all should be the best at what we are at our jobs. And hopefully we can fill those void and drive evil out by being so awesome.
Yeah.
That's what I hope.
Well, I agree, and I enjoy doing what I do. I've always enjoyed doing what I do, and I know that in my life there are choices that I've made that I could have probably done better at. I think that's the biggest issue. You can always still, I think, be your own best coach for you if you really think about what you do, and that gets back to self-analysis. But
Right.
um, I think everyone can, in a sense, be a coach, but your job of coaching may just be you, because I do believe that
100%.
ultimately, yeah, we have to make our choices, and we are the ones that can know best what we really need if we think about it and work at it.
Yeah, 100%. I think that for me, my own personal experiences, all the external things I was saying to everyone else came back on me. All the things, you have the heart of a field mouse, you have character, you're not willing to fight for your team. It all came back on me. Where's my character? Where's my fight? What am I fighting for? Who am I? Where's my character? And it came back on me, and that I'm worthy of finding my character and my spot of honesty. And I think that's what I hope that most people find. I think that most people suffer with tremendous pain, that they don't feel value in who they are and what they are, and don't think what they do matters in the world. And I think if I could tell anyone anything, please, God, don't believe that. That's the biggest lie out there. That's the biggest fake news. I don't mean to be political. I'm not.
No, I
But
hear you though.
that's the biggest non-truth there is. Well, there's more to us than consumption. There's more to us than being clickbait. There's more to us than vacations. Each and every human being has the awesome opportunity to change the world. And if they don't believe that, they'll never even try.
Well, like Gandhi once said, be the change you want to see in the world.
That's true.
And I think we all so often probably don't recognize how much we probably are changing the world just by what we do. And sometimes that change may not be for the best, but then we have to look at ourselves to find out why that's the case, if we even recognize that we're changing the world.
Yeah, it's hard to see, but me personally, I think that the fact is that the world is here. The world is here. We are, a lot of us, alive. We have the potential for a great future. We have incredible, innovations that could happen any day. Diseases cured, food, water shortage problems solved, and waiting for that error, that corruption and selfishness aren't important. I think that's what I'm waiting for personally. That a world that corruption and what's in it for me is not the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're there. I think there's a lot of people like you, a lot of great people out there, and I think there's more good than the news lets on. And I honestly believe that. I see it, I believe it, I hear about it.
We look for way too much sensationalism rather than substance.
Yeah, we're bored, aren't we? Always.
Yeah. So you have 6 children, I think you said.
Yeah, believe I are, as they say. Yeah, wonderful, unbelievable. You, I went from probably being the worst Jew or the most, I could care less, to being a decent, good Jew. It's just shocking to me that the life I live.
And do they all consider you a good coach?
I don't know. I hope my kids like me. I try not to be so hard. I try to be more very mellow and very easygoing with them. You can't coach your kids because there's too much emotional involvement. You can be there for your kids, but like I can't coach my kids. Do you know what I'm saying? I can't coach my wife. I wish I could. I can't.
Well, she probably thinks she can coach you, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
okay.
You know what?
But
If I had half a brain, I would say she can.
yeah,
I don't know if I'm that. I don't know if I have that like, little of an ego, but
whether you
yeah,
listen, but but
I should appear coachable.
how old are the kids?
So my oldest is 19 and my youngest is 8.
Wow. Well, you know what? I kind of disagree that you can't coach your kids, but coaching is different with kids. It's
Yeah,
ultimately who you are and what you are and the kind of example that you bring to them. So you can't tell them what to do, but hopefully you get them to establish a mindset that shows them that you are there for them, as you said, and that
100%.
they can come to you and that
100%.
you're going to do everything you can to help them with whatever they do.
100%. What I meant as coach is I can't use the same
I know.
style. I can't get in
No,
their
you can.
face and say, you're not give me 110. Yeah, they'll start to cry. You got to just love them,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, that's some of the best coaching in the world is all about loving them.
Yeah, that's true. I hope I do a good job. Sometimes, the discipline I'll do is to defend my wife. If I have to be a hard, tough, it's not because of anything, an insult to me. It's because the kids act up to the mother, and I'll come in as an enforcer to help her, and I'll put my foot down. And I'll use those opportunities to be a tough guy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'll tell my kids that, my job is to be a good father. Being liked is not that important to me. My job is to be good, and I'm only tough when it's not personal towards me. When it's about something disrespectful to my wife. I say that I get angry about two things: lying and being disrespectful. Besides that, I have no other rules.
Lying and what was the other one?
Dis, Disrespectful.
Disrespect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's it.
the the issue is that, parents can't always be friends, but they can be parents. And
True. True.
hopefully kids learn, well, hopefully good kids, well, any kid can learn that by the time at least they grow up, that when they have to go through it, that they
Um, I,
recognize that there's value in it.
I have great kids. Yeah, seriously, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Each and every one is so wonderful, uniquely wonderful, easy. Yeah, all the parent conversations I always have with teachers is just like 2 seconds. Thank God. Wonderful kids get up. Wonderful kids get up. And it continues. But my wife
have
does a great job.
have they all been over and visited the States at all?
Yeah, sure. We did the Disney World thing. It was great. My mom and my stepdad took us to Disney World, and it was wonderful. We've been a few times. My wife has family there. I brought my kid for his bar mitzvah to see a Red Sox playoff game, and brought him to a Patriots game, and I had a blast. So yeah,
So
we try to
while
get
they're
over there.
so while they were up there in New England, did they get some lobster?
No, no, it's not kosher.
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't
It
expect
is
you to
a
know that. Don't worry about it. I don't expect you to know Jewish law and kosher. It's okay.
Yeah, well, I didn't think about the fact that there's the kosher issue that yeah, that
No
wouldn't work.
worries. No worries. It's okay. It's all
Yeah,
good.
well, but going to a game, that's kosher. Just don't eat some
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
just don't eat all the food.
that's true. And there's so much kosher food today in America. It's just I used to not eat kosher food, and I don't really miss much. The only thing I miss is probably pepperoni pizza. That's the only thing I would say is like something you just
Yeah.
never going to get in the kosher world. I never liked lobster, so I don't miss that.
I like lobster. But my favorite salami is kosher salami.
See, there you go. The salt is
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always been the best. I've never been a fan of Italian salami like kosher salami. I grew up with it. My mother is Jewish, so I count. And we always the only salami we ever had was kosher salami, and it's always been
Wow.
one of my favorites.
You said your mother's Jewish?
Uh-huh. Well, was now
Wow.
she's passed, but yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if you know this. According to Jewish law, that makes you Jewish.
I understand. That's why I said I count. Um,
That's right. You do as much as me. Oh, that's cool.
yeah, and I But I also think that from a religious standpoint, all of us need to recognize that all these religions come from the same place. And it's just crazy the way people think that they're the only one in town, and it just doesn't work that way.
I hope I don't come across like that.
You
If I
certainly
do,
don't.
if I do, yell at me. If you do, I give
You
you
don't.
permission to be my coach and say to me that that's not what I'm here for. I'm better than that. Don't do that. If I come across
haven't
like
heard
that, act like that, smell like that.
haven't even heard that attitude once, but I see it as you do so much in the world.
Well,
And it's
if I put my ego out there, I always want everyone wants to be right and feel right. So it's like maybe I always think that if I fell into that trap, you know, but at the end of the day, you're just trying to do good. You're just trying to hope that the world survives and that people hear your message about, that they can do unbelievably awesome things and grow. And so, I read that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I'm sure
yeah,
you did too.
yeah.
By criticizing, condemning, complaining, it's just not going to accomplish anything. It's not going to
It
help us.
just doesn't it just doesn't help.
Have
You
to
know,
read
I
that book.
I used to say I'm my own worst critic, and I've been learning that's really the wrong thing to say because that's still a negative thing. And so what I do believe is that if I learn to step back and be objective, I'm my own best evaluator, and I can be my own best teacher, but I don't need to be my own worst critic. It's really a question of looking at things and deciding what I can learn. And I'm better at doing that for me than anyone else if I allow myself to be that way.
Wow. Michael, if you were in Israel, you'd be a big rabbi, I'll tell you that much.
Well, I want to get over there and visit. As you know, I work for Accessible, which is an Israeli company that
Yeah,
makes products that help make websites accessible. We ought
that's
to get
awesome.
you. How far are you from Tel Aviv?
Not far at all. Not
There
far.
you
When you
go.
come,
Because
please look me up. That'd be great. I'll be happy to
well,
come out and see you.
we're gonna have to introduce you to folks at Accessible.
Oh, really? That's nice. I'd love to meet everybody. That's wonderful.
But one of the things that I've noticed over the past year and a half is Accessible has a culture where it truly wants to make a positive difference in the world, and that's why the company began. Well, the company began because three guys needed to make a bunch of websites that they had created for people accessible, but they've expanded that. And I love the Accessible goal, which is to make the entire internet accessible and inclusive by 2025. And yes, it's a lofty goal,
That's
but
awesome.
it's an appropriate goal, and I wish more people would buy into that concept. And Accessible has worked very hard at it. And everything that I have observed about the Accessible culture
Mm.
is all about being a culture that truly wants to serve. Yes, it's a company that wants to make money. It's a company that sells a product, but deep down, it's a company that has a culture that's servant based, which is really important.
That's awesome to work for a company that you love, feel that good about. Yeah, I'd be happy to help you guys. I'm a sales guy. I love business to business. Maybe I
There
can
you
be of
go.
some service.
Well, I'll have to introduce you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I hope when you come out to Israel, I get a chance to see you in person. My wife's
Well,
a tour guide, so if you bring your wife, we can bring you some tours.
as long as you have wheelchair accessible places to take her,
Yeah, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
we'll make it work. But we definitely want to do that at some point. And as soon as Accessible wants me to come over, but we're having a lot of fun doing the podcast, so
Awesome.
they must tolerate me and like me because we continue to do it.
I appreciate having me on the show. What an honor. Thank you.
So you've been studying the Talmud for a long time, and I
Yeah,
think that is extremely important and
thank you.
valuable. What's a
Thank you.
piece of wisdom that you can convey to us? What's something that you've learned that you think people should really take away from your studies?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's something you taught me. For 20 years, the Talmud refers in Aramaic to someone that can't see, so to speak. Sagi Nahor. It's Aramaic for great light. Sagi Nahor, great light. And Rav Sheshes was one of those great rabbis in the Talmud from about 1900 years ago that couldn't see physically, and that's how they referred to him. And I always thought it was like trying to say something nice, in a nice way. But you said something on one of your interviews. I think I saw you where you said that you know those of us are light dependent. Now, I have a son who's insulin dependent, so I understand what that means. I am light dependent, and you're not. And then it hit me, wow, that's the meaning of Sagi Nahor. You make the most of your light, and because you make the most of your light, there's more than enough for you. And probably in reality, you have more light than most people on earth. And now I got the meaning of that very, very cool phrase, which I always thought was like a euphemism, like trying to cover up something. But I think now that you gave me a direct meaning, it's literally true. Sagi Nahor. So that's something I learned this week from you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm honored that you think that way, and I certainly want to contribute any way that I can, and that's all we can really do
Yeah,
is contribute as best we can.
that's it. I hope people listening here agree with me what I said about you.
Well, thank you.
Pleasure.
What do you think about our potential for the future? Again, with all your studies and so on, what's a positive thing that you can think of for the future? Or what
Yeah,
do you want people to take away as a message from all this for where we're
sure.
going or our future?
No, thank you. There's one thing, there's lots of prophecies out there, and whether they're, how do you say this? When you can see into something, transparency, like how old are they? I remember Nostradamus, this TV show, people freaked out about the Nostradamus prophecies, blah, blah, blah. But like
Yeah,
there's prophecies here that are written, they're translated by the Greeks thousands of years ago. And how close are they and accurate are they? And how well do they describe today's situation? And what are they for the future? And you hear a lot of people, a lot of religions, a lot of, yeah, Armageddon, you know, catastrophic, la di da. And the one thing that I know, the Talmud is based on there's an oral tradition, like an alphabet. An alphabet has to be transmitted orally. That's how the book is alive because there's a
yeah,
tradition that teaches us, and that's called the oral Torah. And one of the traditions that I was looking for, was there hope for mankind? And what I found out is that the prophecies that are bad that didn't happen yet, if it happens, it's a catastrophe. They're not meant to happen. They're meant to be warnings. Like if we don't grow, we don't change, we don't take those warnings to make ourselves better, or we don't fight for it, that's a catastrophe. It doesn't have to happen. So like this Armageddon or whatever it is, whatever religion is, I don't even care. Nuclear war, um, you know, the great clearing out, the great reset. It doesn't have to happen. It's a catastrophe if it does, and we should know that these things should scare us only enough to make us better. That's what
yeah,
we're fighting for. When you want to ask that question, why should I try? Why should I believe you, Michael? Or why should I take what you say seriously? Because this could happen and it shouldn't happen. And if it does happen, it's because we didn't care enough and try hard. And I think that's the message I took very happily, that the world does not do. Every human being is not doomed. Every human being is redeemable. Every human being should stay alive. And you could talk about the most evil person. Everyone has the opportunity to turn themselves around. And that's what I took away, that these
it,
prophecies are not set in stone.
interesting because in the Christian religion, the Bible last book is Revelations,
Right,
and
right,
it
right.
it has and it's the same sort of thing. It has a lot of prophecies in it, a lot of things that
Scary.
revelations say is going to happen,
Right.
and it should be scary that we recognize that and say, does that really need to happen?
So my
Yes,
version of this, no. No,
yeah,
no.
no, I understand. That's my point. Is that we're given the information with the opportunity to change it
Yeah,
if we truly want to. It all goes back to listening to God. It all goes back to listening to our hearts
yeah.
and not trying to just one up everyone and be someone who won't listen to ways to improve the world
Right. Or try, care.
or or try. Yeah. All we can do is, well, now I'm with Yoda, do or do not. There is no try, and we can do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I know you're right.
We can do it. It's really a
Can't do it.
question of what we choose to do.
Yeah, it's important enough to us.
Well, you see, we did go through an hour of Unstoppable Mindset, and you did have stories, and it all worked out really well, didn't it?
I appreciate the you believing in me. I really do. Thank you. I didn't know. You got it out of me. You coached me through it. Thank you so much.
Well, it is really fun, and I'm honored to have you on Unstoppable Mindset, and I hope everyone listening will feel the same way. And if people want to reach out to you and learn more about you, or maybe
Yeah,
people in Israel are looking for a great sales guy, how do they do that?
sure. So I have an email, Charles Cohen. Charles is like Charles, King Charles, Cohen, Cohen, sales, SALSLES at gmail.com. Feel free
Cool.
to email me. Yeah,
Well,
Charles Cohen.
then I
It
hope
doesn't have to be about sales to anything. If anyone wants to talk about anything, I'm cool.
football.
Football,
I know there are
sports.
some football enthusiasts at Accessibility, so we'll have to see what we can do.
Awesome, because we need sponsors.
There you are. There you
Awesome.
go. There you
Awesome.
go. Well, I want to thank you again for being here. And I want you out there listening to realize that I thank you as well for listening, and hope you've learned something today. Hope you've been inspired. I'd love to hear from you. I want you to please email me and let me know what you think about all this today. Feel free to email me at Michael, Michaelhi, at accessibe.com. Accessibe is spelled Accessibe. And by the way, go to www.accessibe.com to learn about the Accessibe products that are available to help make your websites more usable and accessible for people with disabilities. Also, if you can't want to, you can go to www.michaelhinkson.com and find out about us there, or michaelhinkson.com/podcast to learn about Unstoppable Mindset. But you're probably listening to us in any number of different places where the podcast is available. So wherever you are and whatever you're using to listen to us, please give us a 5-star rating. I would really appreciate that. And we would all be very grateful. But I want you to feel free to reach out to me. And please also, if you know of anyone, and Charlie, it applies to you as well, if you know anyone else who you think we ought to have as a guest on the podcast, I would really love it if you'd let me know. We will respond to anyone who reaches out, and we will explore having them on the podcast or having you help us get them on the podcast. So thank you very much for that and for listening. And Charlie, one last time, thank you as well for being with us today.
Thank you very much.